friends, now we'll see how to calculate depreciation. Now, as we are all aware that what is depreciation? That's wear and tear on the assets used in the business, or we can say obsolescence on the use of the assets over its useful life, right? So we'll see a couple of famous calculations of the depreciation method, that is SLN, that is straight line method, and WDV, that is written down value method, as we say in accounts. In this our current case, the cost of acquisition of a particular asset is 40,000. The salvage value, that is an estimation that it will be a scrap value after its useful life, will be 4,000, and the life is 10 years. Now how do we calculate depreciation? So the SLN method itself is the function is SLN in Excel. So we'll write SLN. Now bracket open, it's asking for the cost. The cost of acquisition is 40, comma salvage is 4, and useful life is 10 years. And I'll press enter, and if you can see, this is how I can find the depreciation for 1 year. Suppose I have purchased. Now normally we purchase the normally the financial year starts from April to March, right? But sometimes the assets are purchased in August, right? They don't purchase on the first day of the April all the time, right? It's highly impossible that on the 1st of April the management is purchasing all the assets. So they are purchasing in the middle of the year. Now suppose they are purchasing in October, right? Now from October, November, December, Jan, Feb, March, we have 6 months to provide the depreciation for. So what I'll do, I'll just divide this by 2. So I'll get half the amount. So this is how I can calculate depreciation by SLN method. Now how do we calculate the depreciation by WDV method? So in Excel we have a function called DB. DB stands for declines balance method. So I'll write is equals to DB. Again it's asking for the cost. I'll select the 40,000 one, comma salvage value, life, and this is the first year. I'm providing depreciation for the first year, so I'll write 1 year. This one stands for the first year, first period. Now as per WDV, the depreciation will be provided like this, and it will keep on declining because that is declines balance method, and this will remain constant for the overall life. Now suppose I want to know for the second year, so what I'll do, I'll write 2. So this will decline. If I want to know for the third year, let's say third year, so I'll write 3, right? Suppose if I want to know for the 11th year, so it is going to be an error. Why? Because the total number of expected life of the asset is 10 years. How can I find depreciation for the 11th year, right? So I have to have only 10 years. It will show me depreciation only till 10 years, right? So this is how the function works. Now suppose in this case also in WDV method, let me write one first. Suppose the asset is purchased in the middle of the year, right? And on October, now it needs to be provided depreciation for 6 months. So how do we do that? Let retype the calculation. DB cost, salvage, life, period, and comma, if you can see the months written here, right? So if I write 6 months, so it's going to calculate for 6 months. Now see, for WDV 12 months is 8,240, and for 6 months is half of this, right? So it's quite obvious. Now again I'll calculate for 3 months, so I'll select the same, this cost, salvage value, life, and 3 months, right? So it's right. What's wrong in that? All right, so I forgot to write 1. That's for the first year, and then 3 months, right? Now it's going to fetch me the result like that. So I hope that you have very well understood how to calculate depreciation for the number of years. The calculation for few number of months will only be required in the first year, when it is the actual acquisition of the assets in the middle of the year. Otherwise it will go on for the 12 months only. So please try that yourself. Thank you so much. Now let's calculate EMI in Excel. Now we know what is EMI, that stands for equated monthly installment. If we take a loan and if we repay that amount in an installments, that installments are called EMI. Now for a layman it's a repayment of the loan, but from accounts point of view, the EMI has 2 things in that. EMI constitutes principal repayment as well as the interest payment, right? So we'll see in our example how to calculate EMI. We'll also see how much is the principal repayment in that particular EMI. We will also calculate what is the amount of interest that we are paying in that particular EMI. right? So we have the scenario in front of you on the screen. The rate is 12% per annum. So if nothing mentioned is per annum. Installments are 5, that is yearly installments of our 5 years, and the loan amount we are taking is 50,000. Now how do we calculate? So we have interest, we have function called PMT. So I'll write PMT is equals to PMT, and asking for the rate. So I'll select the rate of interest, comma, PV, that's number of installments that we have, and minus PV, that is the present value, so that we are taking the installment. So it's fetching me that EMI will be 13,870. Now that's an EMI. Now EMI will remain constant for all the 5 years. EMI will remain constant for all the 5 years. What will change? The contribution of the interest amount in that and the principal amount will change. The principal will be highest in the first installment because a huge amount is due. Now as and when we make payment to the principal amount, the interest will reduce and the principal repayment will increase. Now this is the first EMI that we have calculated. I want to see how much is the presence of principal repayment in this first EMI. So for that we have function called PPMT. Now as you know, PMT is for EMI, but PPMT, P stands for principal, so it is easy to remember like that. Now the rate again, then this is the first installment, so I'll type first instead of 5 because this is the first EMI. Then I'll select the number of installments, which total is 5, and comma minus 50,000. Right, so this is the amount of principal repayment that we make. Why do we write this in minus? Suppose if we don't write this in minus in EMI also, so it's fetching my EMI in negative, right? So that's a repayment, so we make it in minus. Now how do we calculate the presence of interest? So again, we have a very interesting function, that is IPMT. So I stands for interest, right? So in PMT we have to add I. Now the rate of interest is again 12, then first EMI, then 5 installments, and minus this amount. And this is the presence of interest. Suppose if I total this both plus this, so it's going to get me 13,870. That is the EMI amount, right? So in this EMI, I can say that I'm paying 6,000 as interest and 7,870 as the principal repayment. Now, what will be the total payment? So it's very simple. Suppose I'm making this EMI, that also for 5 times, right? So total will be this much. This EMI multiplied by 5 installments. Now what will be the total interest that I'll be paying? So I'm taking loan of 50,000 and total I'm paying back is 69,000. So I can say this is equals to this minus 50,000, which is my amount. So this is 19,000 is the total interest that I'll be making the payment of to the person I have taken 50,000 on loan for on 12% per annum interest for 5 years, right? Now how do we calculate for various years, like first year, second year? So let's calculate the principal amount. Now what is the principal amount? That is PPMT. And what is interest? That is IPMT. So is equals to PPMT, that is rate. So what I'll do, I'll log this so I can drag it, then comma 1, comma, I'll log this as well, comma, minus 50,000, and I'll log B3 as well. I'll close, I'll drag it, but what I'll make the changes, I'll make the changes. This is the first installment, this is the second year, right? This is the third year, this is the fourth year installment, so I'll make it 4, sorry. Second, third, fourth, and fifth year. So this is how the principal will be repaid. Now principal will keep on increasing and interest will keep on decreasing. Now let's calculate interest. So IPMT, and that is the rate, so I'll fix it, comma 1, I'll change it later. Then I have this number of installments, common 5, comma, minus this 50,000. Bracket close, enter, and let me drag it. And I'll change the years manually to, then I'll change it 3, 4, and 5. and this will be the total. So is equals to this one plus this cell, and I'll just drag it. So EMI will remain constant, right? So if you see that EMI is constant for all the 5 years, what is changing? The contribution of the interest and the principal amount. Interest will be highest and it will go to lowest, because at now this is the time where I owe only 12,000 rupees from the 50,000, right? So the interest on 12,000 will be this much for that 5th year, and this principal repayment will keep on increasing, whereas the EMI will remain constant. So this is the total EMI, so we have already calculated. This is the total interest, that also we have already calculated, and the principal repayment is 50,000, that we already know. So I hope you have understood how to calculate EMI for various years, how to calculate what is the amount of principal repayment in that particular EMI, what is the amount of interest repayment. Now again, just like depreciation, suppose I have 5 installments, and if I write here for the 6th year, so I'm going to get an error because I have only 5 installments. How can I calculate the principal amount present in the 6th year, right? So there is no 6th year, so I'll press Ctrl Z. So I hope all have understood how to calculate this. Please try the same examples and verify the figures, the same figures. Thank you so much. Heading towards the calculations of financial functions, now we'll see how to calculate the future value. Now in the given example, we are given the rate, which is 5%, the term of 36 months. Now again, if nothing is mentioned, this rate is assumed to be per annum. Now this term is in months, present value per month, and the payment is per month, and the present value is this. Now the function for FV is FV itself. Before we go ahead, I hope everybody knows that 1 in FV, the calculation of future value, in 1 means the beginning of the period that we are making the payment of 500, and 0 means the end of the period. So the same concept of capital budgeting will apply here as well. Now if I'll write FV, it's asking me for the rate. So this is the rate, but this is per annum, and I have given the months. So what I'll do, I'll divide it by 12. Then I have the months, that is the number of installments, minus, then I'll write this is minus because that's an expense, and this also in minus, and I'll write 0 as the end of the period. So if you can see in the pop-up, 0 means end of the period. So when we are making the payment, will also change because the interest will be calculated accordingly. So 0 means an end of the period payments, right? So I'll write 0 first and I'll see. So this is the future value. Suppose in the same example, I'll write once again, that is the rate divided by 12, comma, 36 months, and minus this, comma, minus this, comma, 1. So that is the end of beginning of the period, and this is the end of the period, 0. So if you can see, there is a difference between future value calculation of some minor amount because of the payment term, the time of the payment. So I hope you have understood how this future function works. Please calculate that. Thank you. In this example, we will learn how to calculate NPV, that is net present value, and IRR, that is internal rate of return. Now, as we know in the capital budgeting, NPV and IRR, they are calculated to know the worth of any investment, right? The NPV is positive, then we accept the proposal. If it is negative, we reject the proposal. Now, what is this discounting rate? This is the inflation rate, right? So we have to consider the inflation rate. Now, this is the outflow that I'm investing 1 lakh and I'm getting series of payments, but that is on different time, right? That's different years. So I have to calculate the inflation rate and see whether this proposal, the investment of 1 lakh and then getting the series of payment after 1, 2, 3, 4 years, is it worth investing or not, right? So we'll calculate NPV, that is NPV. It's asking for the rates, which is this 10%. So I'll select the 10%, then all the values, so all the inflows. I'll close the bracket and I'll add this, the outflow. So I'm getting NPV is positive, right? So I can say I can accept that. Also, if I want to know how much is the percentage of return I'm getting, so for IRR, I have the function as IRR. I'll select all the values that is given here. So including the inflows and outflows, I'll select both, and the 10%. So I'll write it manually. That is 10%. I'll close the bracket. So I'm getting 14%, right? So I'll increase the decimals. So I'll come to know it is exactly 13.9519% return. So if you can see, the inflation rate of a given country is 10%, and investing 1 lakh and getting this series of payments, I'm getting 13% return. So it is more than the inflation rate. Suppose if it less than the inflation rate, so I'll reject the proposal, right? Now let me show you how does it work. Suppose if the discounting rate, that is the rate of inflation, is exactly 13.9519%. Let me write 13.9519%. 13.9519%. So what will happen? See, the NP will become 0 because I am not going to get any return out of that. Suppose this happens to be 15%, right? So what will happen? Sorry, 15%. So what will happen? This is going to get me a negative NPV, right? Suppose this 14.25% and decrease the decimals, I guess. So it's going to get me this amount. Now this is again a percentage format. Let me get it back. Yeah, so I hope you have understood that suppose if the NPV is less or if it is more, so I'm going to get this negative, the discount rate is more. Please calculate this. In the previous example, we calculated how to calculate IRR and NPV. And in that same example, suppose we are given that if we invest 1 lakh at a particular date and the receipt of future inflows will also be given on a particular date. Now we need to consider all these dates payment. How do we consider the date and calculate the NPV and IRR? So for that we have XNPV and XIRR. So how does it go? So I'll calculate XNPV, that is the rate. So I'll write 10% is the rate. Asking for the value, so I'll select all the values, and the date. So asking for the dates, so I'll select all the dates. In here, if you can see, 16% is the an NPV considering all these different dates, right? Now how we'll see what is IRR. So we have XIRR is asking for all the values, so I'll select all the values. Then dates, so I'll select all the dates, comma 10%. That's a return. That's a discounting rate. So considering the discounting rate and considering the dates, this is going to be our IRR. So please calculate this as well, keeping all the different dates. Thank you so much.